Welcome inside Brunch. Had a very tough 18 hours. I believe 17 murders in 18 hours. I'm sorry, that should be 7. God, it would be more than crazy if you get to 17. It is actually 7, as frightening as that is. But we press on. The Minister of Health, Minister Diyal Singh, reopened the debate on abortion when asked if there were any discussions by the government on revisiting the abortion issue. That is, of course, as a consequence of the impact of the Zika virus and how it affects the unborn via microcephaly. He dismissed any change in policy, and he was quickly rebuked by the Prime Minister, who said, not so fast. We are open for discussion. There are many advocates and many learned people who have voiced opinions on this, and that is why we make that our conversation this morning. My guest in this first hour is attorney Lynette Seebaran-Suite, chairperson of the Equal Opportunities Commission. A very good morning to you, attorney. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, Rennie. It's my pleasure to be here.
It is great.
Let me just issue a disclaimer as we commence the discussion.
Mm-hmm.
I am indeed the chairman of the Equal Opportunity Commission, but the commission itself is a statutory commission, and the commission itself has not as yet taken an official position on this issue, and so I just wanted to issue that disclaimer as we commence.
And that is taken.
Our discussion.
And I thank you so much.
These views would have to be given this morning as my personal views as an activist over many years advocating for abortion law reform to deal with the problem of unsafe abortion. Very
well noted. With me in studio is someone you are familiar with, and our audience is familiar with it too. She is the advisory director of the Family Planning Agency. She has been a psychiatrist for a long time, a child and adolescent psychiatrist. She is the president chairperson, was rather the president chairperson of the International Planned Parenthood Federation. Dr. Sharpe is recognized as a leading figure in the field of family planning and sexual and reproductive health in the region. Dr. Jacqueline Sharpe, thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Good morning, Rennie, and thank you for inviting.
There we go. Now I've got the microphone up and we are all right in this area. We're going to start this morning with attorney Lynette Seebaran-Suite. There are continuing discussions both by the question of the legality and the morality involved in abortion. As the attorney, let us start in the legal arena. Speaking at the NGC Human Rights Seminar in response to the minister, you were quoted as sending a message that abortion is legal in Trinidad and Tobago for therapeutic indication. Detail for us what is therapeutic indication and then contrast that with the legality of abortion in Trinidad and Tobago.
All right. The therapeutic indication is the health indication. And this is, for many countries in the world, the indication that governs the law, that abortion is available to preserve the life and health, including mental health, of the mother. So that is what the therapeutic indication means. Mm-hmm. Now, how the therapeutic indication came about was that the Offences Against the Person Act, which we inherited from our colonial masters in 1925, it's 1861 legislation, as I said, created 2 offenses in our Offences Against the Person Act, sections 56 and 57, which made it an offense for a woman to procure an abortion and created a penalty of 4 years imprisonment for her, and an offense, a criminal offense, for someone to assist her in accessing the procedure with a lower penalty of 2 years imprisonment. Now, whenever legislation specifies a penalty, that is the maximum penalty, and the tribunal that is making the decision can impose any lesser penalty. So there is a prohibition against procuring an abortion or assisting in the procuring an abortion in the criminal law. But what is interesting in the criminal sections is that they have the word unlawfully in both sections. So what the sections say is that if the abortion is unlawfully procured, then the offense is committed, which then imports that there are circumstances in which it is lawfully procured. And there have been a series of cases commencing in England in the 1930s and then running through the Commonwealth, most predominantly Australia, which have defined what a lawful means. So if it is that a medical doctor has performed the procedure, he under the legislation as it stands in Trinidad and Tobago, which we would have to call archaic, undeveloped law, the doctor does run the risk of prosecution, and he will have to defend himself. And if he can satisfy the jury that he performed the procedure for good clinical reasons and to preserve the life and health of the mother, he will have a defense and he will be acquitted. So this is the sense in which you have therapeutic abortion. Now, unsatisfactory because you see that the doctor has to run the risk of prosecution. And that is not really a desirable thing. Now, for several years, there have been activist groups in Trinidad and Tobago that have been pressing the Minister of Health, because this is pretty well established across the Commonwealth. Several activist groups have been pressing the Minister of Health to issue protocols which would provide clearance for medical doctors to perform procedures within the narrow confines of this health indication without having to face prosecution. I mean, there can be an arrangement between the police and the Ministry of Health and so to set policy whilst the society debates modernizing the law or liberalizing the law. Now, the modern laws, state-of-the-art laws, as we have in Guyana, provide that in the early stages of the pregnancy, it's a question of a decision between the woman, her family, and her doctor. And it is only as the pregnancy advances that she would have to justify the need for the procedure, where doctors opine that the procedure is necessary to preserve her life, her health, or her mental health, and would be the decision of the doctors. So the current state of the law is very, very unsatisfactory.
These are very old laws. Some folks say they are archaic laws. From what you're just saying there are other countries who have done a leap forward on it, specifically in our region. What would you say is the primary hurdle that's holding back Trinidad and Tobago, who aspire to be one of the more advanced countries, from doing exactly what her neighbors have done in many countries all over the world?
Well, and may I say that Barbados, St. Lucia, and many of the former British protectorates, Belize, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, have laws which provide for the therapeutic indication, following the model that was introduced in the United Kingdom in 1961, where the health indication was clearly spelled out and specified to include the economic circumstances of the woman and her already existing family and her general circumstances. So you have precedent right here in the Caribbean for more liberal laws. I would say the reason why we have not made any progress in Trinidad and Tobago, despite a very, very vigorous advocacy campaign that was carried on by the group Aspire over the period 2000 to for over a decade, almost 15 years, was that the debate tended to be framed in moral and religious terms, which confused the government, who, in my opinion, in my submission, has a different mandate, which is to look at the matter from the point of view of human rights and public health. Because you have to, as an ethical issue, rather than as a moral or legal issue. Now, we can debate the moral and the legal issue until the cows come home, speaking past each other, but this does not advance public policy. And there's no gainsaying that this is a public health issue, and this is definitely an issue of sexual and reproductive rights, which the government of Trinidad and Tobago has has committed in a variety of international instruments signed and ratified to improve. You have the whole gamut of sexual and reproductive health and rights. And may I say that Aspire worked in collaboration with Dr. Sharpe and the Family Planning Association over many years without success in terms of moving the law forward. What we were able to do is clarify the law. We were able to educate the public, but we were unable to bring any constructive advances.
The voice you're hearing, listeners, is that of attorney Lynette Seebaran-Suite. We are discussing abortion in the studio. With me is also Dr. Jacqueline Sharpe. We will get to her in just a moment. But attorney, part of what you articulated there does raise the question of the separation of church and state. That is going to be an issue that I want to go into just a little later on. But let me bring Dr. Sharpe in here. You noted that 22 million abortions are performed globally per year. There are some frightening numbers for here in Trinidad and Tobago. There is also the question of those countries that say, listen, is the mother's health, and there is more than that. The disconnect as to what is at stake in abortion now. It remains between, as Attorney Seebaran said, those who argue in the legality of it and the morality of it. Folks confuse that all the time. Your analysis as to why we are in this state of limbo, or almost going nowhere, with a conversation that we cannot argue because, what is legality, what is morality? You're never going to win that. You're never going to win the morality one, but the legal one is something. Are you seeing any medium ground, any median presenting itself? Where the government can move forward to deal with this high incident of abortions we have in Trinidad and Tobago. And those are only the ones reported, as you said, in the hospitals, and it does not really speak as to the wider amount of abortions that we are having here.
Okay, that's a very complicated set of issues.
I threw a whole lot of issues inside of this. Okay,
but let me first address the issue of the difficulties between the legal and the moral. And I'm going to say that if you're a government providing services for people, you really have to, A, base your decisions on evidence, and B, that you need to be clear about your human rights commitments, and you need to be clear on your public health responsibilities. Women who have unsafe abortions put their lives at risk, obviously. Women who have unsafe abortions, and it might tell you that when you look at the statistics overall, globally and regionally, of who has abortions, more married or women living in unions, and in Trinidad, of course, that need not necessarily be a legal marriage union, but that might be all the ways that we consider to be a union. More women in unions have abortions than women who are unmarried and not. Okay, so that's one thing. So that these people are also putting at risk the safety of their children and their families. Okay, so that unsafe abortion is a fundamental public health issue. The other thing that I think we have to consider very clearly is that it is also a social justice issue. We know very clearly that women who have money or who have some resources, who have some knowledge, can quite often have a safe but illegal abortion, whereas a woman who does not have resources has an unsafe abortion. So it then becomes a social justice issue as well. And I think that in making legislation for a country, we have to put our legislation that addresses the greater good and also is based on evidence and is based on our human rights commitments.